Welcome aboard Rocket Ship, the platform with the most relevant content for competitive examinations. This is Rocket Ship IAS Lab and continuing with our series on answer writing for general studies papers of civil service main examination. We take up a question that you might come across in GS paper 2. Here goes the question. While both India and the United States are union of states, the union is organized differently in the two. Elaborate, giving suitable examples. So, you are almost certainly aware, in fact, all of you are aware that India and United States are two federal republican polities. And in both these two countries, in both these two polities, the states are organized according to the federal principle. That is, the states have a constitutionally guaranteed separate status from the union. However, despite these two polities being union of states, the union is organized differently in the two. This is probably owing to their historical experience, as we would see later. However, we would like to once again repeat this point. The way the union is organized in the two countries is distinct from each other. Then you are supposed to elaborate on these distinctions, giving suitable examples wherever they are applicable. We are introducing our answer with something that would sound cliche, but as is well known that India and the United States are the two largest democratic republics. The federal element in the US and India becomes manifest in constitutional protection guaranteed to states. Please try to appreciate this, that this is the entire idea, that the states have constitutional guarantee, they have constitutional protection. This is called the entire, you could say, the very soul of the federal setup. Basically, what happens in a federal setup, the states do not owe their existence to the union. They do have separate existence that is protected by the constitution. This is, you could say, the key element of the federal setup. In both India and the US, states have their distinct political executives. This is another important point, that in both India and the US, the states have their distinct political executives constituted by a state legislature elected through popular votes. So the point is, not only these two countries, that is India and the US, have union legislature, that is parliament and congress respectively, but also they do have state legislatures, and the state legislatures too are elected through popular vote. And please try to appreciate this point as well, that the state government, basically the state executives in both these countries owe their responsibility, they are directly responsible to the state legislature. We would repeat it, that the state executives in both India and US are directly responsible to the state legislature in these two countries. In both the polities, states enjoy autonomy in lawmaking, however, to varying degrees. Basically, in both these two countries, the states do have separate jurisdiction over some particular laws. Even, and this separation from the, you could say, union lawmaking power is separate to varying degrees in both these two countries. Despite these similarities in federal spirit, the union is organized differently in the two countries, probably perhaps a reflection of their history. This is a very, very important point, that basically both India and the United States do have their, you could say, individual histories. Basically, their historical experience is different from each other. That means that they have organized the union separately, differently. So, how Indian Union and the Union in the US are distinct? This can be seen through a number of points. First, the union is sui generis in India, while states have entered a compact to create US. Please try to appreciate it, that the union in India has existed before the existence of the states in India. Probably you can understand that the union owes its existence to the hoary history of India, that is the long history of the Indian civilization, Indian, you could say, civilizational state itself. On the other hand, the states have entered a compact, the states have actually entered, you could say, an understanding to create the union in the US. As we would see through the example of the 13 states, the 13 original colonies in the northeastern part of present day United States, which entered an agreement to create the union that is called the United States. There's complete separation of federal and state executives in the US, while there is a nexus between the two in India, and this becomes manifest through the office of the governor. That is, the governor is actually appointed by the president, and the governor heads the state executive. So basically there is connection between the head of the state executive and, you could say, the constitutional head, that is the president in the case of India. On the other hand, you are probably aware that in the case of the United States, the governor is an elected official, that is, the elected governor. In the case of US, on the other hand, the governor is appointed by the president in the case of India. There is watertight separation of federal and state jurisprudence in the US, but there is underlying association in India. Basically, the state law in the case of United States are completely separated from the federal law. That's not the case in India. While in most of the matters, the state laws and the federal laws are separated in India too, but in some very, very important, you could say, aspects, they do have some connection, as we would see in the case of criminal laws mostly. States are sacrosanct in the case of US, that is, they are inviolable. Basically, their existence, or for that matter, the area, etc., are inviolable in the case of US, but they can even be abolished or diminished in the case of India. You can appreciate this through a more recent example of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which was abolished, and instead it was reduced to the status of a union territory. Elaborating on these points, the Indian Union has existed for much longer than the states. The states have followed the union. This historical experience has informed the Indian Constitution to affirm preeminence of the Union, while the United States' origin can be traced back to the 13 colonies. As we have discussed in the passing, its origin can be traced back to the 13 colonies in the northeastern states of northeastern part of present-day United States, entering a solemn contract to create the Union. So this is basic difference between the, you could say, the Union in the United States and India. That in the case of India, the Union preceded the states. On the other hand, it is the states which created the Union for United States. The head of the state executive, governor, is directly elected in the case of United States. We have certainly discussed this point, and confirming complete separation of federal and state executives. As the governor is directly elected through popular vote, he is not responsible in any matter to the federal executive. In India, the Rajyapal or the governor is an independent constitutional functionary. This is a very important point. Despite being appointed by the president, the Supreme Court has held that the governor is an independent constitutional functionary. Please highlight this point. Who is nevertheless appointed by president, the constitutional head of the republic. This shows a nexus between the state executive and the union executive. This establishes a nexus between the federal and state executives, undergirding separation of the two. Moreover, there is watertight separation between federal and state law in the United States. The federal courts are normally barred from hearing matter before the state courts. That you are certainly aware is not the case in the case of in India, where the state and the federal judiciary are integrated. On the other hand, while states have distinct lawmaking power under 7th schedule. You are certainly aware that in the case of India, it is the list 2 that enumerates the state law, subjects under 7th schedule. The Indian state jurisprudence is not insulated from union's lawmaking power. Nowhere it is more apparent than in the case of criminal laws placed under the list 3, that is concurrent list. Union laws override state laws in criminal matters. Please try to appreciate this very important point, that as the criminal laws are placed under the concurrent list, if there you could say originates a circumstance where the state and the union laws clash in criminal matters, it is the state law that would prevail over the it is the union law that would prevail over the state law, giving it, you could say, prevalence over the state laws. Affirming the subordinate status of states, parliament can diminish, basically reduce the area or even abolish states under Article 3, a power exercised in the case of Jammu and Kashmir. But states are sacrosanct entities in the United States. That is, it would need a constitutional amendment to abolish a state in the case of United States. And the conclusion we are making here is that the Indian Union originated with a unitary bias, while the US leans on federal tendencies. However, we would like to repeat this, and we would like to point out that this idea that the state can secede from the union in the United States is an erroneous idea. That is, states cannot secede even in the case of United States, and that's the case for India as well, that the states have no power to secede from the union, either in the US or in the case of United States as well. US recognizes separate existence of states, while India swears by a connection in spirit. Basically, the entire idea of cooperative federalism takes shape from this underlying connection in spirit. So finally, the final we would like to add that the state is that the union is organized separately in India and United States, owing probably to their historical experience. This was all on the distinct nature, that is how differently the union is organized in the United States and India. We would bring you another lecture in a few days. As usual, we wish you all the best. Thank you.